Yo, what's up guys? Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck guide about this Mardu Auras list I've been doing really well recently on the ladder with. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 49-11 with this list, and in my opinion it's one of the best positioned decks in Historic right now as well. And now before I get into it, if you want to try the list out for yourself, I'll have an importable deck list down in the description. And also, if you're an MTG Zone Premium member, I've already put out a full deck guide article about this deck that has a bunch more details, a full sideboard guide, how I tweak the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So if you're a premium member and you want to check that out, that'll be down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Mardu Auras list in Historic. Now obviously Auras as an archetype has been decent for quite a long time now, so I'm not going to spend ages on the core of the deck, but if you're not familiar with how the deck plays, you basically want to get one of your 4 threats in play and then just put a bunch of auras on them to grow them quickly, get a really big threat, and then just attack the opponent and close the game out within the first few turns of the game. Now typically in the past, auras has been just straight red-white, so I'm mainly going to be focused in the initial parts of this video explaining why I really think the Black Splash massively improves the deck at relatively little cost, and then after that I'll go through all the individual cards and explain why they're here. So in straight Boros auras, typically, this slot here where we've got Thoughtseize is Giver of Runes, and this slot where we've got Juggernaut Peddler is usually either Amped Raptor or Hushbringer. Now, I don't think main deck Hushbringer is particularly good right now. There's a lot of decks it does basically nothing against, and against decks like Eldrazi where they have Null Drifter, it can actively help out your opponent as well. But in terms of these two, I think if we start off with this slot, Giver of Runes versus Thoughtseize, Giver of Runes is typically used to just bait out that first piece of removal, right? Typically, you play the Giver, it gets hit by a Fatal Push, and then clears the way for your 2-drop. And obviously you can also use it proactively to clear the way for you to attack, which does come up especially against decks like Eldrazi where they have typically all colourless creatures, which enables you to attack him pretty quickly. But for the most part, Giver of Runes is just that first piece of removal baits to hopefully clear the way for your more powerful 2-drops to survive. And Thoughtseize does a very similar thing, right? You Thoughtseize on turn 1, get rid of a piece of removal, and then your 2-drops are clear to just start attacking and closing the game out quickly. But the massive, massive upside of Thoughtseize over Giver of Runes is that it also interrupts your opponent's proactive game plan, which is absolutely huge, especially against the combo decks, because I feel like Boros Auras against combo decks like Lotus Field or Val, you can win, obviously, and for the most part that matchup is a pure race, which is an issue because, you know, a lot of the time the opponent will have a faster start than you, a lot of the time the opponent will be on the play, which also makes a really big difference in that matchup. But for the most part, from my experience, that matchup is just 2 ships passing in the night. Whoever gets off their thing first tends to win the game, and there's not really too much interplay outside of that, apart from the opponent bringing some spot removal against you. Whereas having Thoughtseize and Juggernaut Peddler really helps to improve those matchups, because against Lotus Field, Thoughtseize on turn 1, get rid of their crop rotation to stop them getting Lotus Field. Against, you know, Val combo, getting rid of their Val or Trelisara then means they have to dig for another combo piece before they can go off. So this really helps to break the symmetry in those sorts of matchups against the combo decks, which in my opinion are 2 of the best decks in the format right now. Additionally, having Juggernaut Peddler over Amped Raptor is also a really big deal, because I feel like it gives the deck better counterplay to spot removal. I think Jund midrange is probably the most difficult matchup for auras in general, and having Juggernaut Peddler in addition to Thoughtseize and Shard Mage's Rescue as ways to get rid of the opponent's removal so that your Spirit Dancers and Light Paws can survive is pretty nice, whereas Boros usually only has Giver of Runes and Shard Mage's Rescue, so you're slightly better against Jund because of that. Not to mention, obviously, if the opponent doesn't have spot removal or they have a big threat like a Pyrogoyf, getting rid of that preemptively is really nice. And then additionally, Culling Ritual is such a common sideboard card right now because it's great against all of the Lurrus decks, including auras as well as Val and Energy, for example. So having Thoughtseize and Juggernaut Peddler also gives you really good counterplay to Culling Ritual as well, which the Boros lists basically have no good way of stopping either. So I really think this is a significant upgrade, really improves your matchups across the board, because even outside of combo matchups, the flexibility of Thoughtseize being able to just slow the opponent's proactive game plan down if they don't have a piece of spot removal is really nice. So the only downside of doing this really is the mana base, right? The mana base is a lot more painful because we're having to run 4 Starting Town, Mana Confluence, and the Shocklands as well. But having said that, I don't really think there are many decks in Historic right now that really punish that. Ever since the Swiftbiz Teachings nerf, Wizards has kind of fallen off, and traditionally Wizards has a tough matchup against auras anyway. And then Goblin Bombardment decks are also a concern with direct damage, but again, I feel like that matchup has felt pretty good, and we also have Sheltered by Ghost that can start gaining us a bunch of life back as well. So I feel like there is, especially in the current format where there aren't a ton of burn decks or decks that deal direct damage, the extra cost of the more painful mana base feels pretty low, and the extra upside of being able to interrupt the opponent's early game plan, especially when combo decks are very powerful right now, feels like a significant upgrade to me. So that's why I really much prefer Mardu over conventional Boros. Next first off, I'm just going to quickly go through the individual cards and explain why they're there. Starting off with the threat, so Esper Sentinel, I do feel in auras like you need 16 creatures for consistency, not only in terms of not having to mulligan as much to find a threat in the first place, but also drawing multiple threats more often, which then enables you to play through interaction like discard spells and spot removal a lot easier. So I feel like Esper Sentinel is really important. Sentinel is also really big because it gives us 12 turn 1 plays. We've got Esper Sentinel, Thoughtseize, and Demonic Ruckus, which I think is a really big deal because this sort of deck, if you don't consistently have a turn 1 play, is very slow, right? If you do nothing on turn 1 and then just run out a Core Spirit Dancer or Light Pause on turn 2, that's such a slow and also vulnerable opening, right? Especially if the 2-drop is your only threat. If it just gets killed straight away, you're in trouble almost immediately, whereas having a turn 1 threat like an Esper Sentinel or Thoughtseize or plotting Demonic Ruckus ensures that we have a powerful, strong curve out and we're not just opening with, a vanilla threat on turn 2, if that makes sense. So Sentinel is really nice to ensure we have turn 1 plays, and then it's also a decent creature to suit up with auras because, especially if the opponent's trying to use interaction or non-creature spells to do other proactive things that don't interact with the board, it's kind of similar to Core Spirit Dancer in that it will produce card advantage for you. It's also very nice to be able to go Esper Sentinel on turn 1 and then just use Sheltered by Ghost immediately on turn 2 if the opponent plays a card that's easy to remove as well, or you want to be able to remove, I mean. So Esper Sentinel is really important for consistency and to just ensure we have enough turn 1 plays. Then Spirit Dancer and Light Pause are just the two strongest creatures in the deck in terms of a proactive game plan. Light Pause is definitely the best because it's just the fastest, right? Getting the aura directly onto the Light Pause and especially being able to tutor the aura just ensures that you can set up lethal a lot more easily, but Core Spirit Dancer is really nice as redundancy for this sort of effect. It's also kind of nice in multiples, and it can also be advantageous to draw rather than putting Light Pause on in grindier matchups where the card advantage does matter, especially if you're missing land drops as well. But these are your two most powerful proactive threats for sure. And the Juggernaut Peddler already kind of explained this. I much prefer it to Amp Raptor. Amp Raptor does have better highs, right? If you go Amp Raptor into another 2-drop when you're, don't have any other threats is big. If you go Amp Raptor into Sheltered by Ghost when the opponent has something that's good to remove, then it's also good. But there's also a lot of other cards that are pretty, aren't really great hits off the Amp Raptor as well. So I'd say on average, Juggernaut Peddler is a lot better. And then, like I said, the ability to interrupt the opponent's proactive game plan seems a lot better to me than just getting a random card out of your deck. If you could consistently find the Spirit Dancer or Light Pause or Sheltered by Ghost on Amp Raptor, then I'd be more high on it. But the fact you have a lot of other, 1-mana auras that don't really do too much doesn't make me particularly high on the card, as opposed to Peddler, which, interrupting the opponent on turn 2 is a really big deal. Then in terms of the auras, Ethereal Armor is definitely just the biggest power spike in the deck, enables you to close the game out very quickly. So this is basically a staple 4 of in all aura lists. Same sort of thing with Shard Mage's Rescue. Buffs your creature, but is mainly just here as a way to counterplay spot removal, which is the best way to play against you, right? Especially post sideboard. Most decks are going to be bringing in extra single target removal against you, so having Shard Mage's Rescue, in addition to Thoughtseize and Peddler, gives you good ways to, play around spot removal. And then we've got 3 1-offs, mainly here as Light Pause tutor targets, but these are also decent to draw as well. Griff Spoon gives Light Pause flying, which does make a pretty big difference both on offense and sometimes on defense in certain matchups. Kaya's Ghost form is really nice to be able to protect against interaction. Now, this is an interesting slot because I think you could make an argument to run Melt Strider's Resolve in this slot as well, which is a green aura, which I still think would be fine to run as a one-off here because you're mainly going to be tutoring it off Light Pause, and we do have Mana Confluence in Starting Town that could cast it, but from my experience, I haven't really felt, there obviously have been some games where I've lost because I didn't have Melt Strider's Resolve in the deck, but there are way more games where I think I would have lost because I didn't have Kai's Ghost form. Again, especially post-sideboard once the opponent starts bringing in extra interaction against you, and especially if the opponent's playing board sweepers as well, right? Kai's Ghost form is one of the very few ways we have of playing through Culling Ritual without preemptively getting rid of it with a discard spell. So I really feel like Ghost form has come up much more often than Melt Strider's Resolve. You could potentially run Resolve in the sideboard maybe to bring it in against the creature decks, but I feel like the sideboard is so tight and most of these other cards are more important. So there's only been a couple of games where I've missed Resolve, but I really like Ghost form just to give you redundancy and protection. Hammerhand is a good way to give Light Pause haste and also just, cancel out a blocker, which can often make a really big difference if you have Demonic Ruckus, because say the opponent only has 2 creatures into play, has 2 blockers in play. If you have a creature with Menace because of Demonic Ruckus, making one of them not be able to block with Hammerhand can just allow you to attack in. Then Shelter by Ghost is probably the most powerful or, standalone aura in the deck, getting rid of any non-land permanent, covers basically all bases, and then giving the creature +1/+0 lifelink and ward 2. Ward 2 is the biggest thing with this, is so powerful, makes the opponent's spot removal really awkward, gives you outs to the opponent's early game plan, and very importantly, lifelink is really big against other aggressive decks as well. So Sheltered by Ghost, incredibly powerful in this deck. And then Demonic Ruckus is really nice because, like I said, it ensures that we have a turn 1 play, which is really important in this sort of deck. I think the best opening with this deck is still plot Demonic Ruckus on turn 1, cast Light Pause, immediately put it on, and then tutor Sheltered by Ghost to get rid of what the opponent's most powerful thing is, and then you immediately have Ward 2 on the Light Pause, which is so difficult to kill early on unless the opponent has Abrupt Decay. So Demonic Ruckus enables some of the best starts in the deck, but Menace and Trample, really, really important keywords to have, especially when we only have Griff's Boon as, another way to give evasion. And also drawing you a card when the creature dies is really huge. I'm sure if you've played Auras at all, you know how powerful these sorts of cards are. Then in terms of the mana base, 21 lands, I have been going backwards and forwards between 21 and 22 lands. I think 21 has felt like enough to me. That is the decent balance. And again, if I had another slot in the main deck, I would potentially try and find room for Meltstrider's Resolve. So I don't think we can really afford to cut any of these to go up to 22 lands. But again, like I said, it's felt like a good amount to me. We do have quite a painful mana base because, like I said, Mana Confluence, Starting Town, and the Shock lands, but you're almost always going to be on the front foot in almost every single matchup. And the reason I've gone for all lands that can, produce white is, first of all, that just allows better sequencing, especially when you have like Ethereal Armors in multiples or, Ethereal Armor into Shard Mage's Rescue. You generally want to have white mana available because most of your auras are white. But post-sideboard, I also really think Leonin Relic Warder is important against Eldrazi, and so it's really important for us to be able to consistently cast this on turn 2 as well. And then we've also got Lurrus, which is just really important. I think this is one of the best Lurrus decks in the format because spot removal, like I've said a few times, is the best counterplay to you. So having Lurrus here as basically a guaranteed way to get back in the game if the opponent does have removal early on is really nice. Then moving on to the sideboard, I still like running Hushbringer in the list, especially against Boros Energy, but there are also a lot of fringe decks as well where this is good against as well, like Devotion, Yawgmoth, Samwise combo as well. So I don't think Hushbringer is as important now as it used to be in the past, but I still think whilst the Ajani Bombardment decks are popular, Hushbringer is still worth running in the sideboard. Then we've got 2 copies of Rest in Peace, which is obviously just generic graveyard hate. Now, it might look a bit awkward running Rest in Peace in a Lurrus deck, but the main reason I've gone for Rest in Peace here is because, like I've said, I think Jund is the most difficult matchup for Auras, and Rest in Peace is so good against their proactive game plan. It shuts off Barragoyf, Pyrogoyf, Jarsil, Detectives Phoenix, Fear of Missing Out, which is basically their entire proactive suite in the entire deck. So Rest in Peace, again, it doesn't protect your own creatures from spot removal, but it slows the opponent's proactive game plan down so much that it buys you time to play out of their spot removal, if that makes sense. And the next up, we've got Alpine Moon. Originally, I had Magebane Lizard in this slot. So basically, this is the slot dedicated to Lotus Field matchup. Like I said, I think the addition of Thoughtseize and Juggernaut Peddler to the main deck massively improved the Lotus Field matchup, but I also do want to have extra hate cards post-sideboard because, again, that is a deck that is capable of outracing you, so you do want to have hate cards for them. So the reason I've gone for Alpine Moon here instead of Magebane Lizard is because Valakut is still seeing some amount of play, and that can be a tricky deck, especially if the opponent can chain together 1 rings, for example. So having Alpine Moon as a card that is good against both Lotus Field and Valakut feels like it's better than running the Magebane Lizard to me for the moment. But if Valakut tends to fall off, especially because if the opponent doesn't have 1 ring early on, you can usually just race against them, then I could see an argument to moving back to Magebane, but at the moment I like the Alpine Moon. And then finally we've got Leonin Relic Warder, which is basically here as an out to Chalice of the Void X=1. Typically Eldrazi is a really good matchup for you because they don't have that much interaction outside of Ugin's Binding and Kozilek's Command, and they don't close the game out particularly quickly either, which is just kind of the perfect situation for you. You just get your threats down, hold up Shard Mage's Rescue for their Kozilek's Commands, and then just race them. But post-sideboard, obviously some Eldrazi decks are main decking Chalice of the Void, but post-sideboard, almost every single, at least the ramp variants of Eldrazi will have Chalice, and Chalice on X=1 is pretty difficult for us to play through, so having Relic Warder as a way to just remove it is really nice. Now, you might be wondering why I'm running Relic Warder over alternatives like Prismatic Ending or Meltdown, for example, and the big reason is just that it doesn't interrupt any of the ratios in the deck, right? If you ran Prismatic Ending, for example, you'd probably have to cut Thoughtseize because you don't really want to be cutting any of your threats because then you have to mulligan more often and it's more difficult to play through interaction, which is a bigger problem post sideboard because the opponent is likely to have more interaction against you, and you don't ever really want to be cutting your auras either. So Thoughtseize is the only real slot where you can bring in the Prismatic Ending, and the issue there is that you're removing the amount of 1-mana plays that you have on turn 1. Like I said, I think especially in a deck like this where you don't really get going until you've got one of those 2-drops in play, having a play on turn 1 is so important for your opening to be quick enough. And Prismatic Ending, whilst it can be played on turn 1 if you're going second and the opponent happens to play a 1-mana card like a Utopia Sprawl or a Guide of Souls or whatever, but if you're on the play, it's never going to be playable on turn 1. Even if you are against Eldrazi and they play Utopia Sprawl on turn 1, if you only have one Prismatic Ending, you usually want to save that for Chalice of the Void anyway. So, replacing Thoughtseize with Prismatic Ending basically leaves you with just 8 turn 1 plays, which really, again, will lead to consistently slow starts. Whereas just replacing Juggernaut Peddler with Relic Warder, it gives us outs to Chalice X equals 1, but keeps the ratios of the deck intact, which keeps the consistency of the deck high, if that makes sense. So that's the list overall. Like I said, I think it's really well positioned right now. I think Aura is just good against Eldrazi for a start because they don't have that much interaction, and you have decent counterplay to interaction between Thoughtseize Peddler and Shardmage's Rescue, and you're just a fast, consistent deck there. Against the combo decks like Val and Lotus Field, you're capable of racing them anyway, especially if you're on the play, but now you have 8 ways to disrupt them, plus hate cards out of the sideboard, so those matchups feel pretty good to me. The only really bad matchups are the very heavily interactive ones like Jund, and I've seen a little bit more of Dimir recently as well. And again, those are unfavourable matchups for sure, but you do have good counterplay. Like I said, the addition of Juggernaut Peddler gives you more ways to preemptively strip the opponent of removal so that your Spirit Dancers and Light Paws survive. You've got Rest in Peace, which is incredibly good against the Jund decks typically, so even your worst matchups, you still have a chance in. You still have good counterplay. You still have good options for those matchups as well. So I really think this is one of the best decks right now. Obviously, if the format does change to a more interactive situation, then Auras becomes worse. But with the omnipresence of Eldrazi, which really punishes interactive decks, I can't really see that happening anytime soon until, Eldrazi Temple gets hit in a ban list in future. So that's the deck overall. If you've got any questions about the deck, definitely let me know in the comments. Next up, I've got some gameplay so you guys can see the deck in action. Either way, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up! Okay, so we're going second here, and yep, this hand looks good to me. So we're against another Lurrus deck, but we've got Sentinel on turn 1, Spirit Dancer on turn 2, and then even if the opponent has a removal spell, if you draw a third land, we have Spirit Dancer plus... Spirit Dancer plus Shardmage's Rescue. Now, this is an interesting draw here. If we had a Light Pause, I think it's no question I would just go straight for the Demonic Ruckus plot here, but there is definitely an argument for going Esper Sentinel on turn 1, and since we don't really know what we're up against, I think it's best to lead on the Sentinel here. Again, if we could have gone for Light Pause to tutor for Sheltered, then I think it's better. Oh, and we draw Light Pause off the top, which is pretty frustrating. So here, I think I'm going to plot the Demonic Ruckus and just pass back with Shardmage's Rescue open. I don't really want to use the Ethereal Armor here, especially when we have Light Pause and Core Spirit Dancer. Because if the opponent goes Sheltered by Ghost, we want to be able to protect the Esper Sentinel here. Especially because, that's also going to tax their auras, and, we kind of need the third land here. We would like them to play into the Esper Sentinel here. So we'll see if they pay the 1. Okay, they do pay the 1, which is a little bit annoying, but this is actually pretty nice for us because it now guarantees they don't have their own Shardmage's Rescue up, which means that we can just go Light Pause into Demonic Ruckus next turn. Now, I'd love to draw a land so that we can also have Shardmage's Rescue up ourselves, but okay, we don't, which is a little bit annoying, especially because that does also guarantee give them a card off the Esper Sentinel. Here, I'm going to use Demonic Ruckus on the Esper Sentinel because I don't think the Trample and Menace matters early on in the mirror match that much, whereas this will buff the Esper Sentinel, making it more difficult for them to not give us a card. And with this sort of hand, we're kind of locked behind a small amount of mana here. We really want to draw our third land here so that we can go, Core Spirit Dancer, hold up Shardmage's Rescue or Ethereal Armor. Okay, so they Sheltered by Ghost. We do get to draw a card. Presumably they take Sheltered by Ghost here and get back their own Esper Sentinel. Get back their own Core Spirit Dancer, which they do. And we'll see what else they've got. Okay, they Griff's Boon on the Esper Sentinel, which is interesting. So I'm kind of happy to see them buff the Esper Sentinel here because Spirit Dancer does grow very quickly. Okay, Confluence. Yeah, Spirit Dancer does grow very quickly, and that having flying would be an issue, I think. So here, I mean, I think we just have to leverage Light Paws to apply as much pressure as possible. If we go Shard Mage's Rescue, we can get Ethereal Armor, and then we could also use Ethereal Armor again. I'm just trying to work out if we have enough to deal lethal, because with double Ethereal Armor, sometimes you do. I don't think we have enough here to have lethal this turn with the Light Paws, unfortunately, but we can set up a very, very big creature. So we'll put the second Ethereal Armor on. Goes up to 11. And then obviously we could use Hammerhand or Griff's Boon to get around the Core Spirit Dancer blocking. I think we've got to put Griff's Boon on here, and then... I mean, I'm just trying to think if there's any possibility we die on the crackback here at all. I mean, there is definitely a possibility if the opponent goes, you know, triple Ethereal Armor or something like that. But I think at 12 life, on average, we should be all right here. Right, I mean, obviously, we're essentially down to 9. Oh, okay, there's Light Paws. So, I mean, presumably they'll get Hammerhand on the Light Paws, which adds an extra 3 power out of nowhere. I mean, again, I'm kind of surprised they're putting auras on the Esper Sentinel here, because the Core Spirit Dancer, if they put the Griff's Boon and the Demonic Ruckus on, that would represent an additional 4 power in play. Especially when I'm stuck on 2 lands, I don't think there's really much of a difference between, you know, a 1/1 Esper Sentinel and a 4/2 Esper Sentinel. They do get Ethereal Armor on the Light Paws, which does worry me. It makes me think they have Hammerhand in hand, and then we'll Hammerhand on the Light Paws, which would then stop our Esper Sentinel from blocking. And I definitely do think if the opponent had put Griff's Boon and Demonic Ruckus on the Core Spirit Dancer, we'd likely be dead this turn as well. Oh, wow, they don't have the Hammerhand. Okay, that's huge for us. Now, unfortunately, yeah, they'll take the Ethereal Armor, which does mean that we need to draw an aura to win here. But if we do, we can just get Oh, no, we can't get Hammerhand because we have to pay the Ward 2 on Esper Sentinel. I mean, if we attack here, we force them to block, then we get sheltered by Ghost back, which I feel should be good enough, hopefully. Because they have to block here, obviously. Get rid of the Sentinel. We get sheltered by Ghost back, which means we can take the Light Paws, presumably. And I think I want to put the sheltered by Ghosts on... I mean, it's tricky. Light Paws does make us race a lot more quickly, but putting it on the Esper Sentinel makes it more difficult for them to pay or to play around the Esper Sentinel attacks. And it also means that we're much more likely to survive the next turn as well, because we have lifelink on the Esper Sentinel. I mean, obviously, it's not ideal, because if we block and lose the Esper Sentinel, they get a Light Paws back, but they'll get it back post-combat, and we have a lethal threat in play already, so they would need to force a block and then get a flying creature as well. Now, having said that, they do have Griff's Boon in the graveyard, so they can, yeah, they're putting Griff's Boon on the Spirit Dancer, which does give them a blocker for our Light Paws. But I feel like another aura off the top, and we should just be good here. And regardless, I mean, yeah, opponent's on the back foot anyway, so we got there nice. That felt pretty good. So, post-sideboard in the mirror match, I don't really think there's anything we want to bring in here, right? I mean, obviously, you can make an argument that Prismatic Ending could be useful in this matchup over Leon and Relic Warder, and then you've got outs to Chalice of the Void and for the mirror match, but sorcery speed interaction in the mirror is so slow. Not to mention not having a turn 1 play in the mirror is so slow, and if you replace Thoughtseize with it, like I think Thoughtseize is one of the best cards in the mirror match, because even if you're on the draw, you can consistently take the opponent's 2-drops, so I think, I mean, obviously the opponent's playing Mardu as well, so it is more of an even matchup than if they were playing Boros, for example, but yeah, I think we should be all right, especially with Thoughtseize in this opening hand. Now, ideally, we don't want to see Esper Sentinel. It's not great, you know, giving them a card and then taking a card with Thoughtseize. Okay, they lead on Ruckus, so we absolutely need to go Thoughtseize and just got to pray they don't have 2/2-drops here. Yeah, there's the Light Paws, and now we're just hoping that they don't draw a creature in the first couple turns. Oh, come on. Immediately finds a Juggernaut Peddler. I mean, we do have threats, but that does give them sort of an immediate way back into the game. See if they put the Ruckus on here. Okay, they choose to hold off on the Ruckus, which I think is probably the right play, because then if they draw something like a light pause, they can immediately tutor for Sheltered by Ghost, for example. I think in this situation, I'm going to go for Esper Sentinel plus Ethereal Armor, because we just want to make it difficult for them to play around the Sentinel. Like here, they Thoughtseize, but we get an extra draw, which makes a really big difference. And it makes it impossible for them to attack with the Juggernaut Peddler unless they put an aura on it. And if they put an aura on it, then we likely get a draw off the Esper Sentinel. So I do like this opening. And then they do have the Shard Mage's Rescue up, which does make Sheltered by Ghosts much worse as a play here. But we can just lead with Juggernaut Peddler instead. Although I don't love that. I think I'm just going to put Lurrus into hand here, because we really want to use this Juggernaut Peddler to get rid of Lurrus if they put it into their hand, right? If they draw a third land here, I think holding onto the Peddler is a really big deal. Okay, kind of got punished for that a little bit because of the Esper Sentinel there. We do find another Juggernaut Peddler, which is nice, though. So I think I'm going to lead on the Peddler and see if they just cast the Shard Mage's Rescue here. Which I think there's a decent chance they do, right? Because especially stuck on 2 lands, there's not really much chance that Juggernaut is actually going to get cast in this game. And they do go for the Shard Mage's Rescue on the Esper Sentinel, which makes sense. Obviously going to target the opponent here because we don't just want to reveal our hand. And then we definitely want to hold on to this Juggernaut Peddler to hit the Lurrus. It's just whether we go for Sheltered by Ghost this turn or not. We could just plot the Demonic Ruckus and not play into the Esper Sentinel here, which I kind of like that play, because when the game is so low resource like this, we don't really want to be giving the opponent free draws, especially because once they hit 3 lands, they are just going to put Lurrus into hand. But having said that, I do also like the putting Shelter by Ghost on the Esper Sentinel increases its power a lot more, so if the opponent does draw more auras, they're likely to give us more draws as well. So this is a little bit risky, but I feel like it's worth it. It puts us on the front foot. It makes us head ahead on the race. It makes it much more difficult for the opponent to use their auras without giving us extra cards here. Now they put the Lurrus into hand, we can just go for the Peddler straight away, which is a really big deal. So drawing that second Peddler made our life a lot easier here, I think. Okay, no more auras. They do have a second Esper Sentinel, which is good to know about. And then, I mean, we do... It's tricky to say. I do kind of want to play the Demonic Ruckus, but I don't really want to give the opponent an extra draw here. So I think I'm just going to run out the Lurrus instead. And then we've got potential Light Pause into Demonic Ruckus next turn, which is a really big deal. But yeah, opponent's just super far behind on the board. So we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And I can't keep a no-lander, unfortunately. This hand definitely looks a lot better, though. And I think probably want to put back an Esper Sentinel here. Very interesting whether we want to go for Thoughtseize or Sentinel on turn 1. I think we probably want to go for Thoughtseize because there's a lot of turn 1 plays that would be good to stop, against a variety of decks. Oh, wow. Okay, so it looks like we're against Valakut here. And I think we'll take the Zenith because that does represent acceleration, right? If they go Proving Ground turn 1, they could Zenith for Kami, which then accelerates them to, Ice Till. And then we'll go for Juggernaut Peddler here. They do have Dryads. I think I'm going to take the Dryad because, the main thing I'm worried about with auras is Dryad into Scapeshift. That is one of the ways they can potentially race us. If they're just relying on Ice Till, then I don't really care as much about that, really. So they're winding away here, but again, without an Exploration or a Burgeoning, that's not really doing all that much. Wow, they're running Field of Ruin and, basic forests. So, it's a little bit awkward that we haven't found any auras here, but the opponent's also on a pretty slow start, so I'm hoping it shouldn't matter too much. And if we draw one aura, especially with this Core Spirit Dancer, we're off to the races, right? We're drawing 2 cards off each one. So it looks like the opponent might go for Field of Ruin here, which very glad we've got the basic in the deck. But again, very slow start from the opponent. Nothing on turn 3 because we had those discard effects. And wow, another turn of not finding an aura is pretty rough. I still think it's better to put the Core Spirit Dancer in play than to put Lurrus into hand here because, like I said, if we draw an aura and we're drawing 2 off each one, we can just chain together enough for a win. The opponent can get down an Ice Till this turn, though, which is a little bit annoying because it does enable them to get back the Field of Ruin. I mean, thankfully it's not Ghost Quarter. If it was Ghost Quarter, they could start cutting us off a lot of lands. And they do find Valakut as well. And they don't have any non-mountains in play yet either. Wow, we miss auras again. That's pretty rough. So I think this turn kind of plays itself, right? We thought Seize, we put Lurrus into hand. And we'll just take the mulch. But the awkward thing here is if the opponent can get Valakut online before we find an aura, they can take out the Spirit Dancers here, which will make it pretty difficult. Especially if they do also start using Field of Ruin. Now, at the moment, I'm hoping that they don't clock that we don't have more than one basic in the deck. Okay, they mill over a ring. Very happy about that. One ring would also be very tricky, especially now they have found a Valakut. And again, they haven't put any non-mountains in place, so they're going to get Valakut online pretty soon. So really need to find an aura this turn, I think. Oh, wow. Come on. I mean, we'll run out the Lurrus, but this is pretty unfortunate, I think. And this kind of highlights why you shouldn't really trim auras because of situations like this. So now I think we're in trouble. They're going to get Valakut online. They're going to take out the Lurrus. They're going to be able to take out both of the Spirit Dancers here. So had we drawn a single aura at some point... Okay, they're running Ox, which is good to know. But yeah, we're not going to be able to win from this. They take out both our Spirit Dancers, and then they have, 3 damage on tap for the rest of the game. Very happy to have the Alpine Moons here, though. I mean, again, that should have been a game we won. Game 1, if we just drawn an aura. I think, for the most part, auras has a good matchup. Although... if they are running Jund for Culling Ritual, then that's a bit different. But, this is a matchup where I'm very glad to have the discard effects because of stuff like that. But yeah, Alpine Moon in general is just nice because it doubles up as Valakut and Lotus Field Hate. So this is a little slow because we don't have a turn 1 play, but I think we have to keep it, right? Valakut, luckily for us, doesn't tend to have too much spot removal. So I think running Spirit Dancer out on turn 2 should be relatively safe, especially because we've seen Jund lands for them, so I assume they are likely to be on Culling Ritual. Okay. Again, I think I'm just going to run it out. If this was another matchup where the opponent has spot removal, then I think there's a really good argument to be made of just holding on to this Spirit Dancer so that we can cast it next turn with Shard Mage's Rescue up. Okay, there's Mulch, which is obviously very good with Exploration. Okay. So here I think we'll lead on the Sheltered by Ghosts. Getting rid of the, obviously Exploration has been big for the opponent, but, especially since they're running Mulch and Winding Way, we do want to limit their ability to get Valakut online naturally. And then I think we'll just hold Shard Mage's Rescue up here. I don't think there's much advantage to plotting Demonic Ruckus when Shard Mage's Rescue is just going to draw us a card anyway. Obviously, Culling Ritual would be pretty rough, but... Okay, Zenith X equals 1. Is this Cameo Grazer? Oh, Insidious Fungus. Interesting. So they can take out the Sheltered by Ghost, get Exploration back, but... doesn't seem that great to me. I mean, they probably want to do it main phase if they're planning to. Unless they're planning to block and then do it in response, so they just soak up the damage, which is also a reasonable line, but if they've got lands to put into play, it kind of makes sense to do it now, so they can get that extra land in play. But again, I think we should be protected from Fair Valakut with this hand because of all the Shard Mage's rescues. Okay, another Winding Way. Only one land is good to see. Okay, they are running Culling Ritual, which is very good for us to know. And then I think we just want to go for Shard Mage's Rescue here. I think there's a pretty good chance that we can potentially win this turn. Okay, so I'm going to go for Demonic Ruckus. See what we draw. And then we'll go Shard Mage's Rescue. Draw again. And then Shard Mage's Rescue again. And put them down to 1. So now they can't shock in the passage. And even if they do have Culling Ritual, I mean, Culling Ritual will get them back a lot of mana. But we have a good follow-up play here at the very least, right? We have, of course, Spirit Dancer into Sheltered by Ghost, or, you know, depending on what we draw, probably lead on Sentinel just to tax their interaction a little bit if they do have anything instant speed. So yeah, the cards I'm mainly worried about here are the One Ring, but again, they can't really activate it at 1 life. Culling Ritual, which would be rough. Okay, yeah, opponent just scoops up. So going to game 3, I think, again, just want to submit again. We got Alpine Moon over Thoughtseize, which, now that we see they're running Culling Ritual, it is kind of annoying losing the Thoughtseize, but I just feel like Alpine Moon... Actually, yeah, maybe we're supposed to keep Thoughtseize in because we've seen Culling Ritual, because Culling Ritual also answers Alpine Moon, but, you know, as we saw in the first game there, it is valuable to be able to shut off Fair Valakut, especially if they, you know, we're going to be on the draw game 3 here, and if they lead on Exploration or Burgeoning, then Fair Valakut is definitely a way that they can stabilize against us, especially if they have One Ring early on. Okay, this is a definite keep. We've got Alpine Moon into Spirit Dancer here, which is nice. See what the opponent's got. Okay, they do have Exploration again, but thankfully they have to put a non-mountain into play, which is going to make it slightly slower for them to get Fair Valakut online. So we'll go Alpine Moon, name Valakut. So now the main thing we're worried about here is the One Ring and Culling Ritual. Wow, complete whiff on Mulch. Very happy to see that. Now we can run out Spirit Dancer. And again, Ritual would be really rough here. Wow, okay, Dryad, but we have the Shelter by Ghost immediately, which is really huge. But they're missing land drops. That whiff on Mulch was really bad for the opponent. So here, while they're missing lands, I don't think we really need to prioritize Sheltered by Ghosts. If they had their 4th land there, then I definitely think we should do it just to stop the possibility of, you know, Scape Shift or, you know, just multiple Valakuts in hand. But since they're evidently stuck at 3 lands, I think it makes more sense to get the Spirit Dancers in play, and then we have better counterplay to Culling Ritual, because we're going to be drawing a bunch of cards and refueling our hands. Okay, there is Cammy, so now I think we probably have to take out the Shelter by Ghost, you know, because they're getting close to Scape Shift or double Valakut naturally, which would be a bit of an issue. Oh, okay. Light Pause is interesting, but again, I think we want to go for Peddler just in case they have... Wow, they do have double One Ring. We have to take one of them for sure. I'm kind of surprised they didn't run out the Insidious Fungus, though. I don't really understand why they held on to that. But regardless, we can go Sheltered by Ghosts here. And I think we'll target the other Spirit Dancer just to spread our threats around a little bit more. Now, again, from what we've seen, Culling Ritual is the main thing we're worried about. But, you know, with Dryad in play, I think we do have to take the Dryad because they'll go One Ring, draw, and then they could draw into Valakuts to get it online. So now we put them down to 6. They'll presumably cast the One Ring here. But this is the really nice thing about Spirit Dancer is we can just draw a bunch of cards to help us refuel if they do happen to draw into Culling Ritual. Wow, another Sheltered by Ghosts is interesting. So again, I'm going to run out the Spirit Dancer here, and I'll Sheltered by Ghosts on the 3rd Spirit Dancer. And now we're going to be drawing 3 off each one. So even if they do happen to draw into Culling Ritual, we should hopefully just have good enough stuff to be able to refuel. We'll take out the One Ring. And then we could Hammer Hand, but I think Hammer Hand, especially while they're at 6, is very useful with Light Pause, right? If we go Light Pause, Hammer Hand, we can get Ethereal Armor, which would be very close to lethal anyway. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops up, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're on the play here, and yeah, this hand looks good. We got Sentinel on 1 into either Peddler or Spirit Dancer on 2. Usually going to be Peddler, but obviously it depends what the opponent's playing. So Gigantha could be a few things. Could be Is It Wizards, could be Jund, could obviously be a Fringe deck. But yeah, either way, run out Sentinel on turn 1, and then likely going to be Peddler on turn 2, because then we can go Spirit Dancer plus Ethereal Armor, which is pretty nice. Okay, Blood Crypt, so likely going to be mid-range if I had to guess, but we'll see in a second. Okay, so we're against Jund, which is interesting. So they've got Fatal Push, Inquisition, and Jarsil. I think I'm going to take the push here, especially because they've got Jarsil, because exiling does mean it doesn't go to the graveyard, so Jarsil can't flash it back. Now, obviously, they can go Inquisition, the Spirit Dancer, into Inquisition as well, but I actually think I'm going to take Jarsil here, thinking about it, because I don't really want them to flash back either Fatal Push or Inquisition here, really. So obviously, Fatal Push, leaving them with Fatal Push and Inquisition when we have a Spirit Dancer in hand is a little bit awkward, but I don't think it should matter too much, really, because they presumably take the Spirit Dancer here. Then we could either put Lurrus into hand or put Ethereal Armor onto one of our creatures, for example. But I think here I'm just happy to put Lurrus into hand. We've got rid of their discard spell, and they don't have a way to trigger Revolt and Fatal Push. Oh, wow, they have a second Inquisition off the top. So that's a little bit unfortunate. But we still have Ethereal Armor here, even though they do have Fatal Push. But they are missing land drops as well. So we'll attack in here, and if they don't draw their land for the turn, then using Fatal Push to kill Esper Sentinel will draw us a card. And we are getting in for some amount of damage, but yeah, it does. We're obviously flooding out here, and we've already lost Lurrus, which is our protection against flood here. So wow, okay, opponent giving away that they have an additional Fatal Push here because they're using different artworks, which is kind of a bit odd. So we'll attack in here, see if they use the Fatal Push. Okay, they choose not to, which is interesting. So I think I'm just going to ship it back, because if I run out the Spirit Dancer, they're just going to use the Fatal Push straight away. I want to keep dealing damage with the Peddler to force them to use Fatal Push on it, hopefully. And then that will hopefully clear the way for us to use the Spirit Dancers. Obviously, the risk of doing this is if they happen to draw a discard spell off the top, then we're in trouble. But, we can't afford to play around everything. So I think I'm just going to ship it back again here. Obviously, the downside of not running Spirit Dancer is if we do happen to draw an Aura here, then we're not able to attack the same turn unless we equip it to the Peddler. They do have another land, and they do have access to enough mana to go for Pyrogoyf here, though, which is a little bit awkward. But if we draw an Aura here, we can hopefully go Spirit Dancer, Aura, draw a bunch, get 2 threats in play, which is really big. Oh, wow. Okay, perfect. So now we can go Spirit Dancer, Ethereal Armor on one of them, draw a couple, hopefully find another one. Wow, we found Hammerhand. Okay, that's absolutely huge, because now we can give Spirit Dancer haste. And again, we got rewarded for holding on to the Spirit Dancers here, but I think this is probably the right play, even though we did get lucky, because they would have just killed one of our Spirit Dancers with Pyrogoyf. So we definitely kind of stole that game there, but I think we're in a reasonable position to recover then anyway, especially because we drew Thoughtseize off the top. So this is definitely the matchup for Rest in Peace, and it's difficult bringing in Rest in Peace because you've either got to trim on threats slightly, which isn't great in Jund, where you typically want to draw your threats in multiples to be able to play through their interaction. But if you cut 2 Thoughtseizes instead, then you have fewer turn 1 plays, which makes the deck slower. So at the moment, I like cutting 1 Thoughtseize, 1 Peddler, but I could see an argument to cutting 2 Thoughtseizes because having a high density of threats is very important against a deck like Jund, for example. Okay, no discard spell turn 1 is really nice to see. I think I'm just going to plot the Ruckus. Obviously, Sentinel is very good against Jund, but considering they've already got Hierarch in play, they're going to be able to play around the Sentinel tax fairly easily. Wow, okay. Bunch of Hierarchs here. I'm going to push to the second main phase just to see if they have a Fatal Push, because Arena will give away priority if they did, right? Because they can technically target their own creatures. So skipping to the second main phase there was to basically see if Arena gave priority for Fatal Push. Now, obviously, the opponent could have bluffed and set a stop, but they didn't there, so it just kind of gave away they didn't have anything. And now, obviously, we are vulnerable to Abrupt Decay, and they do have enough mana to pay for the ward. Oh, wow, okay, they have Culling Ritual, but I'm kind of happy for them to get it out the way early here, because they do get a Hierarch back, but we get to draw a card off the Demonic Ruckus, and if they don't have a great follow play, we do have Spirit Dancer into Ghost form, which is pretty good. Okay, so they Jarsil and they can flash back a Hierarch here. But now this turn, Shard Mage's Rescue is nice, but Kaya's Ghost form is just one of the best pieces of protection in this matchup, because if they do have another Culling Ritual or a piece of spot removal, we'll get the Spirit Dancer back, which is a really big deal. Okay, they do have Inquisition, but our hand is pretty stacked here, right? We've got protection, we've got ways to grow the Spirit Dancer, we've got Sentinel as well as another threat in case they do somehow take out the Spirit Dancer. Yeah, okay, opponent just ran out of gas. So that's normally a tricky matchup, but we managed to get there. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, this looks good, right? We've got Sentinel on 1 into either Peddler or Lightforce on 2. So opponents on a Lurrus deck obviously could be a variety of things. We'll see what they lead on here. Sentinel into Sheltered by Ghost is also another possibility, depending on what they have on turn 1. Okay, Confluence, there still could be a variety of decks. Wow, Confluence into Ponder. That makes me think Lotus Field, probably. You know, especially because of the Confluence. If it was like a Dimir land, I think there's maybe a chance it was Dimir Control or something like that. But Confluence into Ponder makes me think it's, yeah, okay, Lotus Field. So here, I think we just have to take the crop rotation, right? Obviously, the awkward thing here is we can't see what their lands are. So there is a chance that they have a Lotus Field and they can just stifle it in here. But I also think there's a pretty good chance they were relying on that crop rotation to set it up. Yeah, okay, that pretty much gives it away then. Okay, so I think I'm going to lead on attacking here, and then we could obviously either go Thoughtseize plus Ghost Form or Thoughtseize plus Grifspoon, or just go for the second Peddler. I think I like going for the Peddler here, just because it gets another body on the battlefield as well, diversifies our threats a little bit, and the Grifspoon or Ghost Form isn't really that relevant here. Okay, yeah, they can obviously stifle it. So maybe we're supposed to go for Thoughtseize instead to take the Underworld Breach in case they do find a Lotus Field. But even if they go Lotus Field Stifle or Lotus Field Consign, I feel like they would need another turn to use Breach anyway. So we would have had this turn to take their Breach with Thoughtseize anyway. And I don't think there's anything main deck they can run to stop this. Okay, now we see Besaiger as their other land. So we'll definitely take the Breach here because we don't really care about the other stuff. I mean, Hidden Strings can be nice as a starter, but again, they don't even have Lotus Field in the first place here, so... And then I think I'm just going to run out Light Pause. We don't have to worry about interaction, really. But yeah, I think we should be pretty good to win this turn, right? Even if they do find a way to set up Lotus Field here, they don't have the tools to go off. Okay, they just run out the Juggernaut, but we have Sheltered by Ghosts here. So I'm going to Sheltered by Ghost on the Juggernaut Peddler. I don't think it really matters what we put on though. Yeah, okay. Opponent just scoops it up. So they're getting rid of that crop rotation, basically won us the game. This is why I love the discard spells in this matchup. Having said that, I still do think Alpine Moon is better than Thoughtseize in this matchup because the issue with Thoughtseize is obviously they can draw stuff off the top, right? If you Thoughtseize away crop rotation, they could just draw a Lotus Field off the top or a crop rotation off the top, whereas having Alpine Moon on the battlefield basically just shuts them off doing anything, really. And it also really limits their mana, which is a big deal as well because... You know, if you compare that to something like a Magebane Lizard or, you know, a Damping Sphere, for example, they can still use the Lotus Field to cast a 5-mana spell like a Lorien Revealed, whereas Alpine Moon not only shuts off their ability to combo, but it also shuts off their ability to use cards like Stock Up or, you know, Pour Over the Pages to dig for outs, if that makes sense. So I don't typically like keeping one-landers, but I think... we can get away with it here because we've got Esper Sentinel, which is so difficult for them to play around, which can hopefully draw us into the second land. And we've also got Alpine Moon, worst case scenario, to stop them from comboing as well. Okay. So I think because we're not worried, you know, we can still cast Alpine Moon next turn. I think we're going to lead on the Sentinel here. It's very, very difficult for them to not give us an extra card, especially if they're trying to set up their Lotus Field early in the game. Yeah, okay. Just gives us an extra draw straight away there. So here, can we get away with Sheltered by Ghosts? This is an interesting turn because we have got a lot of options. We could obviously double Alpine Moon. We could Sheltered by Ghosts, the Artist Talent. We could Juggernaut Peddler as well. I don't think we need to worry about them comboing next turn. So I'm going to Sheltered by Ghosts here. Making Esper Sentinel a 2-1 also makes it very likely that we're going to be drawing a card here as well. If I was worried about them comboing off this turn, I think we would be forced to use Alpine Moon last turn. But they need at least one more setup turn before they can go off. So... okay, Yavimaya is interesting. Okay, there is crop rotation. We'll see if they have Stifle as well. I mean, it looks like they might do. Although, having said that, Yeah. So they chose not to spend the 2 mana, so presumably they have a Stifle or Consign here, but we've already got this Alpine Moon ready to go, so yeah, there's the Consign. Makes sense. And now drawing an extra land is really big because now we can potentially go Peddler into Alpine Moon as well. You know, get rid of whatever the best card in their hand is and get a way to stop them utilizing their Lotus Field. Basically makes their top decks a lot worse as well. Okay, so I think I'm going to lead on Alpine Moon here, naming Lotus Fields. And having said that, we could obviously go for Peddler, but I think the main thing I'm worried about in this spot is them having Fragment Reality or Into the Floodmoor, and then they just combo off. Getting 2 Alpine Moons in play basically means that we play around anything they could have, right? Because their only real mass removal for stuff like that they have is Divine Purge sometimes, and Divine Purge obviously doesn't hit enchantment. So I think getting the second Alpine Moon in play basically gives us the best shot of winning from here. I think we take Lurrus here because, I mean, they can't actually cast it, but if they do draw a white land, they can get creatures onto the battlefield. We don't really care about Breach while their Lotus Field is shut down, so going to attack him with a huge Esper Sentinel here, and I imagine we're going to win. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. I presume they didn't have any outs in their deck. Okay, so we're on the play here, and I usually don't love keeping one-landers. I think the only way you can keep a one-lander is if you have Esper Sentinel. And again, I think I'm more likely to keep this on the draw than on the play, but I'm going to try this because I think there's a lot of decks that do need to cast non-creature stuff on turn 1 to do their thing, which could draw us a card. Obviously, we could naturally draw our second land anyway. Okay, we're against Eldrazi, so we're unlikely to get a free card here unless they lead on either Utopia Sprawl or Chalice on turn 1. If they have Chalice on turn 1, then that's pretty tricky with the hand that we've got. Okay, interesting. So it looks like they're on more of an aggressive build, which probably means they're less likely to have Chalice on 1. Okay, we do miss the land, but we can go for Thoughtseize here, which can hopefully slow the opponent down. Wow, okay. They kept a pretty sketchy hand. It looks like they were probably reliant on the Devourer to find them a Temple or Labyrinth, which they didn't do. But we're also stuck on 1 land here as well, so okay. Found the second land, which is huge. I think we're going to go for Peddler over Ethereal Armor plus Thoughtseize because I want to save the Ethereal Armor for our other creatures if possible. And then we get to take the Line Breaker, which is pretty big, because Flesh Breaker we don't really care about as much. And now the opponent needs to find the land drop or they're kind of just screwed here. Okay, they don't find the land, but they do find it that heralds the end. Which isn't really doing too much here, I don't think. So I think I'm just going to run out the Light Pause, attack him with the Peddler, and then just shift it back. Worst case scenario, opponent draws a land and plays a Fleshraker, and then we can go Sheltered by Ghost on the Light Pause, or Sheltered by Ghost on the Peddler and get something with the Light Pause, and then get rid of the Fleshraker. Wow, they take the trade. I mean, I'm pretty happy to see that. Opponent ships it back again. I mean, this is the issue with the aggressive builds. If you're so reliant on Temple and... I guess we take the Fleshraker, yeah. If you're so reliant on Temple and Ugin's Labyrinth and you're not running any other accelerants like Crop Rotation or Utopia Sprawl or anything. But yeah, now we should be good to get in. And I doubt the opponent's got anything to get them back in this game, right? If they need 2 more lands. I guess if they draw Eldrazi Temple or Ugin's Labyrinth, they could cast the Micro Swarm. But yeah, okay, opponent scoops it up. So here we definitely want the Relic Warders. I mean, if the opponent wasn't running Devourer of Destiny, there's maybe a chance that we can get away without the Relic Warders. But with them, I think we do have to stop them in for Peddler because typically if they have Ugin's Labyrinth, they're likely to have Chalice of the Void. You know, if not in the main deck, definitely in the sideboard. But the awkward thing is that I think there's a chance they don't have any other artifacts or enchantments in the deck, which is pretty tricky. So again, another 1-lander, which I don't love, but I feel like with Esper Sentinel on one or Thoughtseize, and then we've got Esper Sentinel into potential Sheltered by Ghost. We do have outs to Chalice potentially. Okay, very happy to not see Chalice X equals 1. And we do find a land, which is pretty big. I'm going to go for Esper Sentinel over Thoughtseize because then it opens up the possibility of going Sheltered by Ghost here, which is very important if they have Line Breaker to just buy us a lot of time. I mean, obviously we could have gone Thoughtseize to take away the Line Breaker, but I just like having Sheltered by Ghost available here, especially because Esper Sentinel is our only creature. So here, I think we just definitely go for Sheltered by Ghost. Again, delaying Thoughtseize by a turn isn't ideal, but Eldrazi is almost always going to have stuff in hand for us to hit this early in the game. So we'll see what they've got here. So it looks like they're hovering over the Sentinel. I mean, they could have Dismember and be able to pay the ward tax, which would be pretty rough. Then we'd be forced to start using Lotus. Wow, they Chalice X equals 2. Okay. So that does shut off the Demonic Ruckuses that we've got in hand, but it doesn't shut off the Ethereal Armor, the Griffspoon, the Thoughtseize. Which is basically, that's going to be my turn this turn. Right, lead on the Thoughtseize so we know what they've got. Okay. I mean, I think we take the Sire because we've got Ward 2, right? They need 8 mana. Or I guess technically 7 mana because of it that heralds the end, but they need a lot of mana to be able to take out the Esper Sentinel here. So, whereas this Sire could potentially just be a roadblock to stop us attacking. And if they do draw Eldrazi Temple, they could just cast it this turn. Okay, Micah Spawn's not bad, right? That will enable them to cast it next turn, but I think they're still short on being able to cast it and pay the ward 2 if they want to take out the Esper Sentinel here. So unfortunately, because Chalice, all we can do is attack here. But again, unless they have another... I don't even know what they'd need. Oh, you're kidding me. Is that enough for them to pay? Wow. That's so unfortunate. I think any other card in their deck... I mean, I guess if they drew like Kozilek's Command, that would have also saved them in this spot. But in terms of casting this Devourer, I think that's the only thing they could have drawn to get them out of this spot. So that's pretty unfortunate. We can still cast the Lurrus, though. And we've got Sheltered by Ghost in the graveyard, but we obviously can't cast it. We can use the Ethereal Armor, though. So I think that's basically going to be our play. Make a first strike lifelinker and hope that that can buy us enough time. And then to be fair, next time we also have Griffspoon to give our Lurrus flying. So presumably they attack with just the Devourer here. Yeah, we'll let that through. And then all we got to do is just put the Griffspoon on the Lurrus and we should win here, right? So opponent got pretty lucky. We still managed to get there. Yeah, generally Eldrazi is a pretty favourable matchup, though, no matter what build they're on.